Hello, world, and welcome back to Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I'm here with my friend Lizelle, and my name's Sarah. And today we're going to be discussing episode 5. So we're going to take a deep dive into Plato, where we just talked about Socrates last week. Well, actually, it's been a while. So a lot's happened. We've had an election and all kinds of stuff. So I guess in the spirit of that, we should get started with a little thing that you had, Lizelle, about platonic love.
Hello, world. Yes, I noticed that John did not mention platonic love, and I thought it was appropriate to do so, especially on your channel. So I wrote a little piece. It's I'm going to read it because a lot of the words are not my own. I got words from these two books. This book informed my understanding of platonic love to a great extent. It's not recommended by John in this series, but it is recommended by John. When someone asks him recommendations of Plato, this is one of 5 books that he recommended. I love this book. I really love this book. It's a beautiful book, and it informed my understanding of platonic love. And this is the other one. I'm literally using phrase by phrase sometimes from this book. Very popular in the sense-making community at this stage, this book. DC Schlinder himself has just joined the community, which I'm really happy about, and I'm sure he's very happy about it as well. Uh, then Plato symbols, some of his words I will be using as well, and then my own understanding as I experience it. So that's the
Citations in true John fashion. John Vervaeke, that is.
well, you have to embody the sage a little
There you
bit,
go.
right? Okay. So let me just get that. Platonic love is most definitely not non-physical. My entire body weeps with longing and wonder when I think of his beauty, his nobility. Platonic love is most definitely not dispassionate. It is madness. It is divine madness, born in lack. Because when I see I don't want to say the object of my affection, when I see the embodiment of my desire, when I hear him speak, I am made painfully aware of the lack of beauty, of nobility in me. This realization of lack is precisely the impetus for Platonic eros to erupt. It is the initiation to the project of self-transcendence. We cannot help but to strive to adapt ourselves to the measure of the one we love. And so the upward journey begins. But it is not only an upward journey, it is an inward journey, a journey deeper, deeper. Once love has erupted, once platonic love or true love is present, it becomes impossible not to see the more in the person we love, the moreness of the person we love. Love is not love unless it wants the whole of what it loves, and it is not content with a mere part. I know there is more to the man I love than what meets the eye. I love him not only with my eyes, as a lover of sights, or with my ears, as a lover of hearing, though I do love him with my eyes and ears also. It is very much physical, but it is also more. He speaks not only to my ears, he speaks to my soul. I love him deeper than mere sight and sound. My desire for him is not solely a desire for sense experience. I long to know the whole of him. And by pursuing that desire to know, to love the whole of him, I come to pursue, I grow into a desire for the whole as such, not just his beauty, but beauty with a capital B, not just his goodness, but the good with a capital G. I want to make babies with him, but here is the important part that is not physical, not babies of flesh and blood, babies of the mind, soul babies. And that is platonic love.
Mm, soul babies. Nice. That was beautiful.
I
It's,
used a lot of great authors in composing that.
yeah,
So,
which is interesting. I didn't, because my understanding of platonic love is like friendship, it's like, oh, it's
exactly.
platonic, like there's nothing there. But actually, when we're talking about like Plato, there's multiple layers of brains or minds you can think from. So there is, and we'll get more into, I
Mm,
guess, what draws people out of the cave, kind of
yes.
briefly summarize it. But yeah.
Yes. Because that's true platonic love. It's not platonic like, oh no, we're just friends. It's like this eros erupted in me and made me want to be a better person. That is platonic love. And then a better person in a very particular way. But
It gets complicated after
it,
that.
it gets complicated.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, to start this conversation, we, well, kind of the big dilemma for Plato here is how his beloved Greece could have killed his beloved Socrates.
Mm,
So we were just going to kind of briefly talk about what Socrates was doing and how he, was persecuted and, his character, some about his character from that.
mm, yeah. So I briefly mentioned to you, but every time I feel like every time I need to apologize to you, and I do every time I need to apologize. So I wonder what I'm going to say today that I'm going to have to apologize about next time, because there will be something, I'm sure, if we look at the patterns right and predict the future from that. Um, yeah, I last week, the previous time we spoke 3 weeks ago now,
Yeah.
actually.
Well,
Um, and we had a lot of time to delve into Plato, so that's good.
it was
Um,
nice.
it was nice. so so you started asking ontological questions, and I, in that moment, got scared. I am not a very brave person, it turned out. I'm a coward. When I was reflecting on that conversation we had, I was like, what a brave person Socrates must have been. He was known for his bravery on the battlefield, but to push people into aporia, that is brave. Like I kind of feel like, okay, I can jump into the unknown by myself. That's fine. Like I'll take responsibility for me. But taking responsibility for another human being whom you do care about deeply, that is bravery. So yeah, the more I talk about Socrates, the more I'm like, wow, this guy was indeed something. So, because we were talking about ontology, and you were asking ontological questions, and I was like, "Ugh." Like, no, no, Socrates didn't ask questions like that, but he did. I was thinking of one particular dialogue that was uh, very much not so just latching onto that, but a lot of Plato and hence Socrates, what his discussions is about ontology. So the nature of being, the really real. It's all about what is really real. And compare or companion to that is epistemology. How do we know? And the two go together very well. And that brings us to a term that, because the two are intertwined in Plato, we know what is real by participating in the really real, by being the really real. We understand being by being ourselves, something like that. Devoted to Plato, but still very much learning. So that is how I understand it, at least. Um, so yeah, ontological questions is big for Socrates, and if you keep throwing people in aporia, there's going to be consequences. We mentioned last time, yeah.
Well, that's so it's really interesting for this idea of participatory kind of knowing, because what I find is that oftentimes my shadows arise in people that I interact with, or, by introducing the uncertainty of somebody else's mind and how I'm going to interact with that, I'm going to see things about myself. And so through that exploration, Socrates was actually exploring himself. And this is what you find. It'll kill you. Literally, what he found about himself, this reflection of himself, this side of himself, the dark side, is enough that
Excellent point to make. Excellent point, because Socrates' whole project was know thyself. So it's an excellent point that you just made. Indeed.
I mean, it's kind of alluded to in other myths. I'm thinking of in Vedic mythology, Arjuna on the battlefield, and I think he wants God to show himself, reveal your true self to me. And then it's God killing a bunch of people and like eating people, and he's like, whoa, 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 wait, that's too much. And this kind of is going to get us further into this whole cave story that we'll get to later too. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but yeah, there's a lot of ways that I can see this kind of point being put across as like there's a there's a monster in there,
Yeah.
to use the term from the um, episode.
Yeah.
So let's go into it. The three minds, right? We're
The
not
three
going to use
minds.
that exact terminology because I really like framing this to our own conversation, and
Mhm.
I like the archetypes that you've come up with because I think they fit better for both of us. So
We both identify as women, so
yes,
yeah.
and so I like well, this could, I mean, I think even like with I think he was mentioning the ego, the id, and the super ego. Like there's different ways that this kind of trilogy of mind can arise, but it's basically this reason versus appetite. So those are opposing one another, and then there's this kind of monkey in the middle, which we're going to call thumos. And that is juggling the needs of the monster and the man from the analogy or from the episode. That's what the lion is kind of
Yeah.
balancing.
I just want to specify we're calling it thumos, according to because Peter Limburg, we're both proudly Stoians, and Peter refers to thumos, although I want to say uh, uh, John refers to it as thymos in this episode. I imagine it's the same thing because it refers to the same part of the three. So yeah, but we're going with Peter's. Peter's our rock. We met
Yes,
through the Stoa, so we're going with
exactly.
Peter in this one.
So thumos it is for us. That's associated with that um,
Lion.
middle mind, or the
Yeah,
the heart, the chest,
yeah,
the, as we're calling it, I think this is the lioness,
yeah,
that kind of social cultural understanding and willpower that we get through that. What's that based on? Some sort of like um, honor shame system. So
yes.
like how we interact with other people.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very social part of us. It's the heart. It's translated different ways. I think the thumos. It's either translated as heart, and you mentioned that John doesn't like spirit, but in this book, when I uh, page through it again briefly, I saw that it was also translated as spiritedness, which
Hmm.
is maybe a better translated
Okay, yeah.
translation. Spiritedness. It's it's a very it's that social drive that. So that's why I think this is the strongest part really. So whoever is in allegiance with the lioness, because we decided to go with the
Yeah.
lady, the lioness, and lusty. So also, John loves alliteration. So
Perfect.
we're going, yeah, perfect.
So it is.
So it is. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. And compartmentalizing those parts of the mind. And I like this idea of training, taming, and learning. So the lady, we'll start here in the head. So the lady has social norms, how you're supposed to act. I mean, I remember as a kid, my grandmother, my granny, my dad's adoptive mother, told me that pretty little girls don't bite their fingernails and things like that. Those little rules that you learn, sit up straight, like those
Mhm.
those kinds of things that you, and for a good reason in a lot of cases, it is like a caring, it's still nurturing and it's still caring. It's like if you present this way, you'll get this in return. And that's going to be about sexual norms, like whether or not you're allowed to be promiscuous or not, because you've got this internal lady that's like,
Mm.
we don't do
Yeah.
that.
She's supposed to have the long-term view. Like, okay, what's going to be best for us on the long term? So, yeah.
Well, to think about this from biological terms, it is a major investment, an egg versus sperm.
Yeah.
Sperm, they get thrown away. Eggs, I
Swallowed.
mean, well, it's interesting to think about the fact that when our grandmother has our mother, our eggs are inside our mother.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, so it's encased. There's so much investment. This has been incubated several generations.
Yeah.
So there's a heavy investment into eggs. And not only that, eggs are huge cells compared to sperm. So just from this perspective of, the type of animals that we are, there's a heavy investment that we make into the egg. So therefore, you need to protect it. That's kind
Yeah.
of your duty as this temple, this body is to be that temple for the egg. If I want this egg to continue into the future, then I need to be cautious about how much, I'm presenting my desire to um, um, fertilize this egg, right? I have
Yeah.
the desire for this egg to continue into the future, but maybe I want it to have a certain pool of genetics as opposed to another one. Maybe I don't want to continue an aggressive uh, sperm combination with my egg or whatever it is. But yeah, there's just like a real, need to make sure you protect the egg.
I'm wondering now if that would not actually be even the lioness telling
Totally.
you yes or
Yeah.
no, because she has the instinct. Even Lusty has the instincts like, "Mm, no, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
well, Lusty maybe not so much. She just wants to be scratched. But the lioness, I think, has some instincts there that we shouldn't. I think the lady is more like religious norms. Yeah, like oh, and I also mentioned like it's really important we should remember she's not infallible. She's not
Right.
infallible.
Definitely wanted
She
to mention
needs
that.
she needs constant teaching, and we are taught. I was raised religious, so we were taught like a lady never opens her legs, like
Yep. Yeah.
so. Then yeah, so no just comes spontaneously uh, if she's in charge.
Yeah,
But
the I wanted to mention that the duality here, because he gives a nice little duality for each of them, is truth and falsity with this one. So it is that
oh
level of thinking that is reason.
yeah.
Okay. And so like you're saying, like long term and abstract. This is what the
Mm.
basis of this um part of the psyche is. And so if we move down into, well,
I also truth and falsity, but I would also add right and wrong,
yeah.
like ethical norms. I would
Yeah.
also add that
For my
there.
own good, like as because we're going to
Yeah,
move into the heart where it's cultural norms for the benefit of
yeah,
us working
yeah,
together and having this
yeah,
cohesive harmony.
yeah,
Whereas, and I mean, these all get in confliction with one another or whatever, but when we're thinking about up in the head, yeah, that reason and
yeah.
right or wrong, yeah, and then we move into the heart, and because this is kind of that middle ground, it says, or he says that the man learns, so the lady learns. the social norms, and then trains the heart how to apply those. So trains for the purposes of honor and shame. That's the duality here. This is for mid-range goals, so not long-term, but mid-range goals, and based on a social context, so based on interactions with other people. I mean, I like how he picked lion for heart. That's
Yeah,
that's on
it's,
symbolism.
it's such a social animal, and such a noble animal, the lion.
Yeah, we call them a pride.
Yeah.
A group of them. Okay. And well, I was just also mentioning, just for the purposes of embodiment of the archetype, that during the Stoa's Thumos Awareness Week was when Mars was just traversing this part of the zodiacal wheel that we're in. So Mars is in Gemini right now. It was in Gemini back then too. So
Oh,
interesting that we've been going back and forth, and now we're having kind of a recollection of that
we're coming back
conversation.
to Thumos. Oh, that's so
Coming
funny.
back to Thumos.
I just want to mention because people watching this might not know. We talk about the Thumos Awareness Week at the STOA. Um, yes.
So
Hopefully, there will be more of those. It was really awesome.
yeah, yeah, I think it was kind of, they were hinting that it was like the first of its kind ever in history. So that's cool. We did it.
Been there.
um and then that other place, I guess, that we can think from, which is the, he's going to call it the monster, but we're calling it lusty, because when
Yeah.
it's feminine, she's lusty and desirous, if that could be used as a word.
Yeah.
But yeah, because this is the pleasure pain spectrum, so that's the duality of this level of thinking. And then this is about immediate gratification. So whatever it is that we're hungry for, whether it is sex or whether it's food or whatever that might be. So very superficial and appetite based.
Yes. The men always go with, because it's the gut or the groins, and the men always go with the gut and chocolate cake. Maybe chocolate cake is some sort of metaphor. I don't know. But yeah, the groin is just as hungry as the gut is. So we might as well talk about her as well.
Yeah, exactly. So when we refer to lusty, that's who we're talking about. I like that.
Although I assume the guts are lusty as well. Lusty can be any form of hunger, right? Or
This is
desire.
what's really interesting about having done the vision quest and having been given that framing of we're going to be eating for you, because it's really bringing in that thumos, or that, I guess, that
Yeah.
togetherness, because they said they were eating the food for me. And so
Mm.
therefore that monster was tamed with that training, that understanding of you're not going to be eating for a while, just let it
Yeah.
go. That's not going to happen.
I like instead of talking about or just about teaching and taming and controlling, I like to alliances, and
Yes, you did say that.
that's a perfect illustration of how Lusty entered into an alliance with Thumos, with the lioness, and how that made her calm. It's like, it's okay that you're not going to eat because the pride is eating. Like, they're doing it on our behalf. We're doing this for the greater good, for the whole, and the whole is eating. So the pride is cool. Like, our social part is with us in this. We have this alliance now. So that is a perfect example, I think,
Yeah,
of
even
mutual.
satisfied by this. I mean, that
Yeah,
was like, I was happy that they were
yeah,
eating. So there was
yeah,
no longer that, yeah, feeling of pain.
yeah.
So,
That's a really good example.
yeah. And so I love that word of, particularly like, because you're really emphasizing the lioness, we're really emphasizing the heart, and how that one's probably the strongest of all of
I
these.
think so.
Well, I mean, I
I think
think that that's why we're human. That is actually what makes us human, because animals have brains and they think, and maybe like we've even seen examples of animals being able to be trained particular behavior. It might be driven by the desire area of thinking, but they have this ability to take on and right or wrong it. But there doesn't seem to be that altruistic kind of humanitarian. I mean, it's humanitarian. So it's very human to have that um lioness brain. Go ahead.
I think the thumos or the lioness is the strongest, but it's not what make us typically human. That's why reason is referred to as the man. And I think
Okay.
Aristotle referred to us not only as the political animal, but also the rational animal. So
Mm.
the reason is actually what makes us different.
Okay.
But I think our animal nature is much stronger, much nobler than we give her credit for. And so I think because we're such we're mammals, like, and mammals want warmth. Mammals want to be held and cuddled and
Milk
you know
fur.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
really nice.
W-
So
Yeah.
I just think that's a stronger drive. I think that's what I mean. Is the thumos is so powerful that whoever she's in alliance with, that's gonna rule. That's like if she's with Lusty, it's gonna be like, yay, go get it, like short term. If she and the lady is in alliance, Lusty
Mm.
is gonna. The ideal is, of course, if all three is in alliance. That
Totally.
will.
You're making me think of also altruistic colonies of animals like ants or bees and
Yeah.
how they have that queen that's in charge and like everything's revolving around that. And they build these incredible structures and tunnels. And so it's really productive in that way. And it is for the benefit of the
Mm.
collective. So, but allegiance. Nonetheless, it just, yeah, we like see these as collective groups of animals, like, wow, they're all together. So, but that
Allegiance.
to resolve
Thank
that inner conflict between the
you. Yeah.
lady and Lusty.
Yes, because we talked about that as well when we started, and I'm so glad you seem to absolutely resonate with what I was saying. Um, if the lady decided for whatever reason, uh, good reason that we heard recently is no more uninitiated men,
Mm-hmm.
not to have sex unless whatever the unless is that she decided on, unless he loves me or unless it's part of the ritual or whatever the unless is. If she decides and she has thumos on her side, then there's no saying yes. That's just going to be a no. But sometimes she decides, and we've all been there. Sometimes she decides no more of this casual sex. But the thumos isn't quite, the lioness is not quite on his side yet. So someone knocks on your door, and it's like, it is cold, and I need to be scratched. So and but both of us, I believe, then had this feeling like we were raping ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If the lady is not in the game, it's just not fun anymore. She keeps screaming no, and the man, no blame on the man, uh, full consent, verbal, physical. The body does what she wants to do, but the head is like no, no, no. So it feels like you're raping yourself, and that is what all these books talk about. The Bible talks of what I want to do, I don't do, and what I do want to do, I don't do. That's this discrepancy that this book is also much a lot about. You would actually like this book. It's very biology based. So
Mm.
yeah, I had to think of you when I was reading it.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and yeah, that akrasia, I think is the word. The akrasia. Let me just. Oh yeah, akrasia is the Greek term of why do we not have willpower? Why do we do things that we don't want to do? But that's when the lady and the lioness is not in allegiance yet. Then
Mm-hmm.
we have those and it's terrible experiences. I mean, raping yourself is not a pleasant experience to have, and yet we
Right.
do
Yeah. Well, this kind of is interesting to think about in those instances when we kind of, um, well, we introduce spirits, even drinks, to
that.
to tell her, hey, chill out. Fine. So spirit, even in that like
Britain. Oh,
liquefied sense, is helping to, I don't know, like say, right now isn't the time for you. Like I get it later. We should probably chat, but live a little,
shut
woman.
up.
Don't be a
Just
prude.
just let it be yes for once, please.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that I think is really important to mention. Again, like I said previously, she's not infallible, so she
Yep.
keeps needs to be kept training.
Hmm.
When you notice yourself saying no all the time to either food or sex, that's not healthy either.
Right.
So maybe you want to look at your reason, like why is she trained this way? Like
Yeah.
read books, talk to people, definitely go into therapy. Like therapy, I'm in a fortunate position. Like my best friend is a therapist. So we often, when there's things coming up, we're like, whoa, dude, I need to look at my shadow and my animus a little bit. So it's amazing. So a constant, you know, but I think personally, everyone should have like a lifelong relationship with a therapist type of thing. If there's things that come up, you should be able to examine yourself. Because
Hmm.
yes, like John is always saying, it's not about your biography, it's about your operation manual. But how was your operation manual formed? Your operate your machinery. How was your machinery formed? It was formed by the things you went through. It's formed by the information you've received thus far in your life. So you also have to question those things in therapy if you want to retrain or reteach, because she needs to be taught, right? The lioness needs to be trained. So you have to constantly reteach her as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, she might be telling you things are no, when in fact it would be really good for you. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's all them keeping all the three keeping each other in check. So it's no uh this isn't the actual place of authority. This is part of the checks and balances system. You need to run her through the monster or the lusty check and run her through the lioness check, because that's what moves us through this world. That's what makes us want to do the
yeah,
things. Those like
yeah,
embodiment. The reason I am
yeah,
here in this body is to experience it. So I want to feel too. I don't want to just logic my way. Like Matt Damon says in that movie, we got to science the shit out of this. It's like, I don't want to logic everything. I want to feel it and embody it and participate
yeah,
with it too.
yes. I'm not sure Plato would agree that she
Okay.
shouldn't be in control, but
Yeah.
I think like yes, there should be all of them should have a fair say. That's what I think. It's
Well, to be fair for Plato, he's trying to, I guess, understand why people would have killed someone. So this is the brain from which you think of to solve that riddle.
which maybe is a good place to go into the cave.
Okay. So do you want to I think you have a reading for that, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. So, do you want to give an overview of the cave story as you know it? And
Yeah,
then I
so
will.
from my perspective, and I think kind of one of my first introductions of this was Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying talking about it in Hunter Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. And so basically, some people in a cave, some of them break free and go out and see the world as it really is, because what they find out is that they've seen only shadows projected onto the wall from this fire, and there's no mention really of how they got there, or yeah. So then they leave the cave, then they go back to the cave and try to tell the people, and the people want to kill them because they're just like, this is nonsense what you're saying, and you're crazy, and you're not going to convince me of anything, and if you try to take off my chains, then I'm going to kill you. And it's actually, we talk about it a lot in astrology too, as you can imagine. So that's my understanding and my experience with it.
Cool. So, first thing that I want to mention, the one coming back where the people are like, hey, you want to take off my change? I'm going to kill you. It's, of course, Socrates. It's
Right.
like um, the Republic is written, everything of Plato. I think John is referring to, hinting at, is based on Socrates' influence and the shock that Plato experienced when his beloved Athens killed his beloved teacher, Socrates. And Socrates is then the one who went up and came back down again. The first word of the Republic is actually he came down from. So it's very that going down into the cave is very very prominent in this book. So that's the first thing about the cave that I want to mention. The second thing, which I love it because you told it like John told it, and like how most people told it, they were they broke free from the change and they went up, which is not how Plato tells it. So I this is like a cheap recent translation, but also have like a more uh, academic translation, and I checked both, and but I'm going to read the easier one. So this is how the people uh, leave the cave in Plato. And now look again, and we see what will naturally follow if the prisoners are released and disabused of their error. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck round and walk and look towards the light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glares will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had seen the shadows, and then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now, when he is approaching nearer to being and his eyes is turned towards more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which he is now shown to him? Far truer. And if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away to take refuge in the objects of vision which we can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the things which are now being shown to him? True, he said. And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up the steep and rugged ascent. He held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities. So that he's someone else or frees the prisoners. They don't free themselves. And then they're forced, dragged out of the cave. It's like, what is happening there? It's
Yeah. I mean, I just keep going back to why we should use the word spirit, but I'm going to leave it because I know. But yeah, that I mean, well, that's kind of one of the arguments you wanted to kind of make too, right? Was that this was that that compelling energy was like eros. It is kind of being possessed by something, and then maybe that's the platonic love that's overpowering.
yes, that's my view at least.
Right.
That we don't make enough of eros. Like the sense making community is very fond of agape nowadays because
Mhm.
it's not, and you make persons out of people through agapic love, and it's beautiful, and it worked for the Christians, but the Christians were a different community than what we are now. Most people in the Western society, even like being a person is taken for granted nowadays.
Yep.
So we don't need validation and someone to accept us as we are. We need to be woken up. We need to be dragged out of our graves, I almost want to say. Like John and his fellow authors wrote a book about zombies. That whole like where where we need something to set us on fire, to
Mm-hmm.
grab us by the hair, come press his body against ours from behind, and whisper in our ear, turn around, right?
Yeah.
It has to be something forceful. I think I wrote it down, but I don't remember where. I think he mentioned something about how desire is as forceful as physical violence, actually. And so when I read about that dragging people out of, I'm like, yeah, it must be platonic love, right? It must be Eros dragging people from the cave. So I think we should make more about Eros. And well, of course, Agape is also important, but mm,
Yeah. Well, this is so interesting because we're in Sagittarius season. I mentioned earlier some reasons why it's already interesting because we're in Sagittarius season, but one of the ideas to this, I mean, how our desire to have that experience is a desire for that religious experience, and how you can't stay at the ashram. You have to go back and interact with life and existence and experience, because if you stay at the ashram, I mean, you can meditate all day and you're in, a different place completely, a totally different dimension, but it's not the human experience. So falling in love with being human and falling in love with humanity, because you learn about yourself through humanity.
the real, falling in love with the real,
Mm,
realizing reality. That's two words that John uses a lot. Like realize in the sense of, oh yeah, I get it now, but also making it real, by being part of reality, becoming more real. Um, that's why we can't stay in meditating state. We have to go back into the world. It's but I'm curious what you were thinking about spirit though.
um, well, I mean, a lot of your description just now with that desire and Eros makes me think about Mars, the planet, and the spirit of Mars being like very primal, very instinctual, and very sexual, and also can be associated with combat and conflict, but is our lust, our desire, when when it's in a good placement, or when it's with Venus or whatever the case is.
But
So
isn't Eros the child of Venus and Mars?
who's that? Eros. Yeah,
Eros?
actually,
I
now that
think
you
Eros.
say that,
Yeah.
so funny. Yeah. Huh.
So
Oh, well, and I use these we're gonna move into form here in just a moment. Um, but
we can spend some more time in the cave.
I think I like to spend more time in the cave because I was picking up on a lot of the keywords that you were saying that I think you were focused on too, which was those suffering and the glaring pain in the eyes. And it's like, this person's going through hell. For
Yeah.
what? Why are you trying to leave that nice, comfortable cave that, okay, maybe there's some images and we don't really know what they are. Maybe they're coming from somewhere else, but we're just going to look past that because this is all I know. Or even if it's, I can't even see what you're talking about because I've only ever seen this.
Mhm.
But the contentment of being warm in the cave, maybe chained up, but at least I know this hell. At least I know what this is. But
It
carrying
could be that you
yourself
don't even.
out.
Yeah, it could be that you don't even know you're chained up. So
Yep. Yeah. Well, that seems to be normally is the case. Um, but yeah, when we were talking before we started recording, we really wanted to emphasize in that this person's being reluctantly dragged or forced into the presence of the sun, and then you get blinded by the sun. And this is another illusion for me with my archetypal understanding of astrology to a Sagittarius, and how Sagittarius is about how you expand in this world. And it is that relationship of knowing too. How you grow in this world has a lot to do with your philosophy, your higher education, your foreign travel, how far you're willing to go out and grow, because Jupiter is this planet of expansion
mm,
and is often associated with philosophy. And melding two archetypes together. It's the chimera, it's a centaur. He's an archer, he's got a long distance view of things. So all of the stuff that was coming up, this was so archetypally rich for me, because what John's arguing with, even discussing Plato, is how much influence Plato and the Bible have over our mind overall in this era. So that was just mind blowing for me to get it all synchronistic, even with our timing of when we're going over it. We're in Sagittarius season, and poof, my whole world has
Yeah.
exploded because we've walked out of the cave, and yeah, so that's really cool. So that's the spirit of Sagittarius taking over me. If you want to talk about spirits, um, I just whenever I wrote that down, it was to discuss that eros and that platonic love. So it's so funny that you reminded me that Mars and Venus make a baby, and it's Cupid, the also Archer.
Yeah.
Just like
Oh,
pew.
oh my God, there's just too many
Soft
similar.
love.
We just see too many patterns and too many similarities. But yeah, it's fun. Makes life
Yeah.
fun. I
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with all that discussion about archetypes, did you have anything you wanted to talk about before we move into how Pythagoras influenced Plato? Because we're kind
Yes.
of leaving Socrates now with the allegory of the cave, because, well, the whole idea of this story is that that is Socrates, like you were saying.
Oh yeah, but we're never leaving Socrates. We're never leaving Socrates with Plato. Even if we go into the more Pythagorean parts, Socrates is never left behind because you refer to how I emphasized and what stood out for you from the reading is the painfulness of being exposed to the light, which I mean we can all imagine if you go in out from the dark into broad daylight, it hurts your eyes. It's like you can't look directly at the sun, and just even if you don't, just this brightness, just it's like if you're sleeping late and someone opens the curtains, that just like close the curtains, that if that feeling, it's painful. And what I was thinking, because I have no idea, I do not understand the forms. I really struggled. I really watched a lot of videos, read a lot, but then it occurred to me, like you mentioned, like Pythagoras was the one who influenced this part of Plato. And Pythagoras was not an ordinary man, neither was Socrates. But Pythagoras had many practices, which one could say shamanic in nature almost. And the thing about the forms, especially, but Plato, the philosophical life in general, you can't just see it. You have to be transformed in order to see it. Your eyes have to change in order to be able to take in that light. To, um, I think, and I don't know where I hear the men talk about it all the time. Your eyes have to become like the sun to see the sun, something like that. So Pythagoras and his followers had these ideas of forms, and they did not. No, I don't know for a fact that they did not, but they knew it definitely by participation, by going through practices, by transforming themselves so that they can know the forms. And I am just not there yet. I need to sit a bit more and uh, do more practices and grow a bit more, change. I have to be more transformed a lot more before I can truly see the patterns. I do think, and maybe that's why I don't want to do it, because I also have a feeling if I read Religion and Nothingness of Nishitani, I'm going to get something because people seem to be really in awe of that book. But I have a feeling, but I might be wrong, that because we talk about seeing patterns a lot, but we talk about seeing correlational patterns. I have a feeling if you can see the forms, if you know the forms, you will be able to see causal patterns. I'm not sure I want to.
Mm,
No, I'm already questioning myself enough about seeing correlational patterns. If you know what I'm saying, it's
yeah,
so
it's
yeah. No. So maybe I'm not seeing the forms because I don't want to see them.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. My practice with this whole correlational understanding, of course, is astrology. And
Mm.
so what I observe is I can see the planets moving. It's actually really predictable.
Yeah.
You can know when Jupiter's going to be near the moon. You can know when there's going to be a full moon. You can know when there's going to be a sunrise. And it's very distilled understanding. There's not, are these seeds going to survive? Or will these
Mm.
which one of these babies is going to survive to carry its DNA? And it's like, all the complexity of
Yeah.
life, but
Yeah.
there's rocks hanging out in the sky. They're really predictable about their movement. I can guarantee they are time. They are instructing me on time. It's a timing technique.
Mm.
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. The sun's going to take 24 hours to do its thing. The moon's going to take 28 days to do her thing. So that's true. I mean, like I could almost say 100% true. I'm saying like 999,
I
but
always
it's
say
it's
99%.
so
And
so now
mm,
what I need to do is embody some other very simple things that I can glean from that. Okay. So that's the big map. Now we can plant this kind of thing during this season. And so like getting that embodied understanding of the seasons and how they relate to plants, these things that are on the sublunary sphere. They exist here on the planet. They are pretty similar to me. We share a lot of DNA. I can learn a lot about myself through this thing that just sits here and exists. And maybe it's farming me for, carbon dioxide or whatever it is. But yeah, building that kind of relationship with understanding things in forms like that. So when I think about forms, I was telling you before we started, was I understand schemas because I learned educational psychology, and Piaget talks about schemas. And so with schemas, I was saying, like, you tell a kid that's a dog and it's something, it's got fur and it's got four legs. Okay, that's a dog. You show them a cat and you're like, what's that? It's a dog. It's not a dog. So then you have to like, that's how the embodied understanding starts to come through. It's like, you don't understand how you know a cat is a cat. You just know a cat's a cat. And sometimes it can be, not necessarily in the case of that, but sometimes it can be a little bit more subjective. So that's why it isn't just a hard line of it's this or it's this. There's something about understanding forms. And so for me, that kind of extrapolates out to complex systems. I can understand more about my world through those
mhm,
timing things that I can be certain are going to continue as they are because they have.
mm,
And
mm,
ancient people, the only ones that we have recorded history from that I know of, have certain things that they applied to those archetypes and they represent certain times of the year. So, what did they mean by that? And then we can try to apply that to our understanding of life cycles. And what we can be sure will happen is like, I'm going to reach age 30. Well, I have actually. Oh my God, I have. But you'll surpass age 30 and like that's going to happen because that's how it works. So anyway,
mm,
long tangent there, but that's my understanding of forms.
mm. I do want to mention the one thing that I got because Daniel Zerubo was very clear. I think I understood him right. He was, but like I said, he was very clear when, well, basically all the introduction to philosophy that I read, and I've read a few, when they explain Plato and his forms, they say it's like the blueprint for making this cup. That's the form. And Daniel said it's exactly not that. It's he used the example then of an origami crane, and it's more like that. It's like something beautiful, but you can open it without it being a chaotic mess then and falling apart, and then restructure it again into something else over and over again, and that is more comparable to the forms. And I think that's beautiful, and I do want to mention it because it's exactly different from what I've been taught. So yeah. And what you were saying about the the forms, like I mentioned, reminded me of Goethe's Urplant, which a lot of people refer to when they talk about the forms. And you mentioned archetypes a lot as well, which is, of course, also the forms. So yeah, I'm hopeful that I will see it one day, but I don't think the forms is something you can see logically. You need to see it exper- experientially. Like you have to participate in the forms to understand it, to
Yeah.
know
And
it.
so in astrology, this is why you reference back. So for me, the practice of journaling is so that I can reference back to where my mind was during
Mm.
that time period. Okay, so when Mars and Neptune are together, this is how I'm writing. So let me try to like channel back into that mindset. It's shamanic in that way of,
Yeah,
and so this is how this is a very Pythagorean kind of understanding. When you understand forms like that, it's like, okay, Mars, Neptune together, this is how I feel. This is what I wrote. It's in this house. Now, how does that relate to it? And so you're like putting together the puzzle logically of feeling, of
yeah,
what that felt like to be experiencing that transit. That's why I do that whole beyond the matrix um
yeah.
every day, or as much as I can. It's because let's take these two planets, describe them, let's now pair them up, they're in this kind of aspect to one another, and that can give you some kind of sense for how this archetype combination is rising in your life. And
Mm.
that's what's so powerful and beneficial to working with an astrologer, is because I'm becoming familiar with the oracle. It's so funny because you have referenced me as the oracle, and what I've learned is to not do that, to actually say that I read the oracle. I'm in relationship with the oracle. And so I am always referencing the oracle. So when I am building this relationship with the oracle, that's going to be how I can translate to humans how this may feel in this body, because I understand my language as a human, and I can speak and consult the oracle and ask the oracle to describe to me in archetypes that I know, because I've learned this language for you, oracle. It's like that's my offering. I wanted to know you. I wanted to understand you. Now that I do, speak to me in this way so that I can, convey that message to this human that wants to participate.
Cool. Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think that's why Pythia needs the smoke.
Yeah.
The Oracle of
And she
Delphi.
is the oracle. Yeah, she is the oracle though. She because the oracle is also the one listening and then repeating what she hears. Um, she's also in between. The priestess is an in between. She just does it through rituals, but she steps in between the divine and the human. Just like that's why it's interchangeable, priestess and oracle, because they both in betweens. That's
Ooh, another Sagittarius reference, because Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's between seasons.
oh yeah.
So this is very much about preparatory too, about how you prepare for the changing of the season. And usually that is to be surrendering and to like kind of um, allow the universe, or, the experience to kind of take you out of the cave or out of the rabbit hole, or whatever
Yeah.
it is, to bring you out and to transform, to experience the hardship of change, because it's going
Mm.
to be a better, truer understanding of reality when you do.
Since we're speaking of the oracle and the priestess, I was thinking of mentioning this, and now we're in on this path. So when I refer to the lady, I sometimes also in our coven meetings I refer to the lady. I didn't, now probably I will, didn't refer to the lady. Like later in the series, we will get to Jung and Koban, and they had like the self, which John calls the sacred second self. Someone, Charles something, talks of the divine double. I think it's a Charles. I think there's a upcoming episode with John and him actually, but I'm not sure. But so that is for me the lady. When I speak of the lady, so there's different layers. Like she's the lady reason. Then there's a lady, my divine double, me, but the true me, the one I aspire to be, me, but the sacred second self, the one I aspire to be. That's the lady I refer to. And then there's a higher lady, and that's the lady I serve.
Mm.
Um, what was really interesting, I read it somewhere. I think it was in this book. Um, when Plato speaks of the forms, he uses the male word eidos,
Hmm.
unless he speaks of the good. then he uses the female form, idea. So um, I serve the good in the feminine aspect, and then particularly in the aspect of wisdom. So the lady wisdom. I hardly ever, she's too high. So I hardly ever, when I say the lady, imply her, because I don't know which lady speaks to me when they speak. I always assume it's the lady, the second self, the sacred second self that I'm in communication. Otherwise, I'm being very disrespectful because my communication with her is sometimes very like, she's like, "Oh, you should do this," and I'm like, "Yeah, no. What are you gonna give me if I do it?" You know, that type of.
Totally. Yeah.
So there's different layers of the lady to me, and we will get later in the series, we will get to the divine double, at least, if not the lady, like the high one, the good embodied as wisdom,
Good to
or
know they have
the
names.
oh, it's my names for them. It's
Well,
my name.
okay, but I interact with these same kinds of layers.
Yes,
Like we're starting to define the mindscape, really.
yes,
Like that's kind of
yes,
what's happening here is that
yes.
we're putting labels on things that I've interacted with
Yeah,
already.
Koban refers to the angel, but he also, it's like, for him, there's like the layers just don't end. Basically, like there's multiple layers that you can communicate with, like outside of this. This is just like Lusty, the lioness, the lady. It's like, but that's just me. Like, but there's
Yeah.
so much more. And
Yeah, because, well, we were discussing this before we started recording too about how as we get to know the consciousness gets to know us better. Like as we're interacting with the consciousness, we're becoming, it's changing, we're becoming, and like there's just like this constant, it reveals more to us once we adjust our eyes to the sun. Like those references that he was making in this episode too were really helpful for me to understand. Like we're saying, what like pain is the reason for staying in the cave. You don't want to go through all of that pain. So of course you're going to stay here because it's easier to not know, to just say that's a lot. I'm just going to block myself off from it and stay down here. So going through the pain and struggling and doing all of that isn't the easier choice to make
but it's also, to me, sometimes it feels also impossible to make the other choice.
once you've
Once
seen.
Eros, yeah, once Eros has grabbed you by the hair,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
what you gonna do about it, right?
Um,
That's so, yeah.
Either repress it because that's what we were saying, like
Oh, yeah,
the
you could.
the bad or shadow way that this can manifest is that you repress it and it just either manifests in someone else in your environment or it'll blow up one day and just come out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh,
well, we made
Plato
it
is
to the
right.
end of our agenda actually. So,
And then
um
some.
what's that?
And then some.
And then some. Yeah. Well, okay, but you did have one, I think, from Neoplatonism. I didn't know if you wanted to read something from there, but I loved how he described the matrix because of course like that was what that's what I'm using for my daily transit updates is beyond the matrix, this idea of thinking outside of that cave. And so the name no, actually I went to see the Matrix on Christmas Day last year
Mm.
um,
Oh, I
under
love it.
some substances that would allow you to experience it in an extra interesting way. And I didn't even I feel so behind to not have caught the fact that Neo's name was Neo because of Neoplatonism. So, I don't know if that was the reason why they did that, but that's what John says. And like he just like casually makes that reference of yeah, Neo, like Neoplatonism. So then you said that you had a book about Neoplatonism that
Yeah, I don't have anything to read. I just
okay.
refer to that. He also refers to this book, and I read this in Istanbul when I was going through my initiation as a priestess of Sancta Sophia. So it is a special. Uh,
What year were you in Istanbul?
this year,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I went to Jerusalem to start the process in 2018. So it's been a.
Wow. I was planning on going to Jordan actually 2021 to be in the Holy Land, and just to like,
Yeah.
I've went to Turkey back in 2005. That was why I was asking. I was like, did we cross paths?
Oh,
But yeah, I love that area of the world. I want to go back.
yeah. Nice.
Well,
I don't know if I'll go back.
like you said, I don't know if I'd go back.
I'll
Probably
see
not
when.
now.
I do think Delphi is the next religious trip that I will make.
Where's that?
Delphi.
Oh,
Mm.
well,
Mm.
I hope there's an open invitation for me.
You already had the
I'm
open
already
invitation.
there.
It was actually pretty cool because we in the one episode I told said the goat thing. It made me think that you're in Greece, and we said like, oh, we should go there together. The next episode started with Socrates, and John started like, if you ever get the chance to go to Delphi, you should. It's like, yeah, okay, that's confirmation, right?
Okay, that's three then. Okay, we're doing it. I'm there with you.
Cool. But it will probably because I have a friend who always do my religious travels with me, and she pointed out that it will probably only be in like 4 years' time.
Yeah,
So we have time.
good. I need planning time for sure.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I think that's such a interesting episode. I highly recommend everybody go watch it. I think this is like I've watched this one more than any other one. I watched it like 3 or 4 times just listening to it. In fact, the first 30 minutes just kind of flew by for me. So, anyway, I think this is setting the stage now to go further into how Plato and the Bible have had such a big influence on our understanding of just the world in general through the mindscape. So I'm excited to get into Aristotle too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'm obsessed with Plato at the moment. I love this.
Does Plato have
I feel
any
like
closing remarks or a
I
way to take us out of
I
here?
I had two books that I wanted to read from, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna read from, but not one of the poems, like a letter which he wrote. Okay. We of the here and now are not for a moment satisfied in the world of time, nor are we bound in it. We are continually overflowing toward those who preceded us, towards our origin, and towards those who seemingly come after us. In that vast open world, all beings are. One cannot say contemporaries, for the very fact that time has ceased determines that they are. Everywhere transient is plunging into the depths of being. Don't know how it relates to this, but I just thought that should be read.
Feels very transcendent, actually. Beautiful. Well, hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about episode 6. So we hope that you join us then. Enjoy the rest of your weeks. Mwah.